Started here. You know, what's really great about this conference is you end up meeting people that you and making friends and seeing people that you probably wasn't expecting when you got here. Talking to our next speaker, found out we have a mutual friend. It happens to be his neighbor. And so it's kind of neat that you can find people that you can visit with and find out some solutions. So our next speaker here, Steffen, is going to be providing economic value of extended crop rotations and cover crops. Ed has a 600-acre northeast Nebraska farm, and he's only 10 miles from South Dakota. He continued no-till for 30 years, but it's only the last 10 years he's been doing cover crops. So let's put our hands together and welcome Jeff to give us this great insight.
All right, thanks. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right. Okay, it's my job to try to keep you awake for the next hour, so we'll see what we can do here. I'm Jeff Steffen. My wife Jolene is here, and this is our farm in northeast Nebraska. Probably doesn't look like a lot of Nebraska. It's the rolling hills, the less soils, sandy. We have sandy hills, dark bottom ground though, and that's a bird's eye view. We have Bow Creek watershed. Bow Creek goes right through our farm. Like you said, we have about 600 acres of row crop, 300 of pasture. We do rent some to a nephew who are trying to get started. So we're probably right now controlling around 500 acres. Diverse rotation, corn, soybeans, oats, peas, rye, and recently we've incorporated annual grazing. So how many corn and soybean farmers are in here? We have quite a few. You know, I kind of like to know, sometimes I'm just trying to show, I am somewhat of a corn soybean farmer. Recently, our rotation is probably only 60% corn and beans. We've gone to a lot of other things. Everybody in here, Kansas, is there any Nebraskans in here? All right. Yeah, South Dakota. There we go. I'm just trying to get a context of what we got here. So, extended rotations for soil health and profitability. These pictures here this is kind of an example of what we do on our farm. The bottom two pictures there are corn and beans. We do have cover crops, incorporated in there. I've done some 60-inch rows, cover crop and that. But the top two pictures there is what really makes our system work. Like in this example, we have oats. We plant a lot of oats. We raise it for certified seed. I'm in the Nebraska Crop Improvement Association. We sell seed that way. But the benefit of having that spring crop in the rotation is that top picture there is we can come in and plant a diverse cover crop and we can raise cows on it. And that system up there is what really supercharges everything that happens down below here. So what I want to try to do is show you my analysis of the profitability compared to what we consider a local corn and soybean farmer. Some things about our farm philosophy. We highly value nature and soil health. And I love to talk about, I love wildlife. I love seeing the soils improve. Unfortunately, I have to explain how we also have to make a living also. And can we be profitable and healthy soils at the same time? So people who have had a big impact on the changes we've made, and I did not put these slides in after I met Dwayne Beck and his wife last night. Some of the long-term research that I've always followed is Polyassa at Rogers Memorial Farm is long-term no-till. And Dwayne Beck with his work with extending rotations and showing how you get profitability. A lot of the things we do on our farm mimic the research that's been done by these two people. What we've learned in the past 30 years, to be patient. A lot of 3-year studies they'll do at a university won't necessarily show changes, but what we've found is long-term That's when we really start to see the benefits. Always follow the principles. And does anybody in here need to be reminded of the soil health principles? I think it's pretty much known. Anytime we have any kind of failure on things we're working on, normally I can trace it back to one of the principles we haven't followed. And then, very little improvement in economics if we don't reduce inputs. What I mean by that is we're trying to put a soil health system into practice. We have to challenge that system. If we want biology to do work for us, we have to let it. So therefore, the reduction of inputs. And then we have to know our numbers and be true to them. My degree in college was actually industrial business management. So one of the strengths we had was the ability to analyze entities and see what's being profitable for us. So here's our family. My wife Jolene. We have a son and a daughter. They're both in professional careers right now. Not sure if any will ever return, but they're very excited with what we're doing on the farm. So back to 1984. How many of you were farming in the 80s? It's getting to be feel and fuel all the time. So I drug my wife to this house in 1984. In the heart of the farm crisis, we bought our farm, and a year later, it was worth half what we paid for it. In 1984, our interest bill was paid for by our entire corn crop. So to make it through that, we depended on livestock. We fed all our grain to livestock, and things got better. So by 1990, and I turn this long-term research because whenever I'm frustrated with the changes I want to see, I can go back to this picture and look how this picture was a big success to me back in 1990. I was just working with no-till, and the win on this picture was the corn didn't wash out. Okay? So you definitely can see what we have for structure there. We lost a lot of soil on this rain. It was a heavy rainfall. The win was that the neighbors had to replant and I didn't. So today this is totally unacceptable to us on our farm. So what's our game plan, kind of what we do on our farming operation? We stack the rotation, kind of what I've learned from Dwayne Beck. I try to make it a point to have at least a 2 or 3 year break between crops. Not all the time, but I try to implement it in there to break up the disease and weed cycles. We have a third crop in the rotation after the corn and beans, whether it be oats, peas, wheat, cereal rye, and as of late, annual grazing. What that does is it allows me to get that 2 or 3 year break. And then after that spring crop, we can plant a diverse crop, summer crop, and we can get a lot of diversity and a lot of biomass. So if it's after corn or soybeans, go into soybeans. Generally, we'll put cereal rye in the fall, terminate as late as possible. Before corn, we're putting some hairy vetch. I used to say no rye before corn, but now we are. And then we graze cattle and cover crops. So does this pay? A few years ago, I got myself into a project that was called Farmers Advancing Regenerative Management Systems. And it was a 3-state, it was Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado. It was a network of farmers joined this. And they challenged me to do an analysis of one field, which is right here, financially, using the soil health rotation. And it just happened to be, it was 2015 to 2019. We had corn, soybeans, oats, soybeans, and corn. So if you look at this rotation, it was just accidentally this way. After this soybean here, there was a 2-year break. There was corn to corn. So stacked rotation means You can plant corn on the corn, but after that you want to have a break. So therefore, after this corn year, there was 3 years with no corn. So it was a good example of an extended rotation with soil health. We had oats in the rotation, therefore we had the diverse cover crop, and here we're grazing cattle in the wintertime. So the analysis, I want to show you some things that it is not. So I don't want you to look at this as a blueprint as this is how you have to do it. It's just an example, you know, that I think you should follow. So what's your context? And that's like why I'm asking, you know, are you corn and beans already? Are you just cattle? Or, you know, what part of the country are you in? All my analysis does not include any government payment or incentives. And anymore, all the decisions that we make on our farm, we don't let any of it justified by government incentives. We make all the decisions based on what it can do on its own. So what we are going to show, though, is a really close analysis of our farm's profitability. And we do a comparison with traditional corn and soybean farms for our area. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked with University of Nebraska. They have suggested budgets that you can use that kind of suggest what the budget is for the year. And then we fine tune that by a local agronomist. I get along really good with a local agronomist, so I like to visit him and I'll ask him, you know, what are the inputs being used? You know, what's the yield? What kind of yields could you get on my farm if you are making all the calls? So before I get into the numbers, I just want to show you an example of our rotation. So here is an oats year. Our growing season is almost like southeast South Dakota. So we can grow very good oats. And this is harvest time. This is 140 bushel oats right here. We leave all the straw. And that is, you know, it's a conscious effort that we want to keep more carbon in the system. So therefore, when in the summertime here we're drilling, I really like this picture because it just kind of shows, you know, what really works in our system. We're drilling into real dry weather here, but we have a lot of cover and we have enough moisture to get a cover crop going. And therefore, we'll end up with something like this. So this is what really supercharges our system, getting a diverse cover crop. It's really hard to get something like this if you're only corn and beans, to get the biomass and the diversity you see there. There's enough diversity and enough nitrogen being grown here that we can basically get a free corn crop after this. And we also graze this. If it's going to soybeans, we'll probably have a little more carbon in the mix. So we do adjust it a little bit according to what it's going to. When we figure our mixes, we actually use the Green Cover Smart Mix Calculator, if any of you are aware of that, or I'm sure a lot of you are. That's what we use to figure out kind of what we want to put in for the mix and the ratios and everything. So therefore, we can put cattle on our crop ground. And generally, probably 2/3 of our crop ground will have cattle on it at some point. And we will not have to feed any hay. Here we have snow cover, and you can see it's almost like putting your forages in the fridge. Everything they're pulling up is green there. So then the benefit of that is, here's a picture drilling soybeans into that cattle grazed cover crop. There's no burn down applied here. So lately we've gone more to putting some winter annuals in with it that we do have to burn down, but in this picture, this was all winter killed cover crop mix. We've gone to grow on non-GMO soybeans for seed. And this is a non-GMO field of beans. There was no Roundup applied to this. We probably used a little bit of a group 14 at planting here, and this is in August. So we get a really good premium in our area for non-GMO soybeans. I don't know how that is around here. It's been very profitable for us. And the corn side of it, the last 4 years, we've gone to non-treated seed. And we slowly kind of evolved into it. So both of these pictures show non-treated corn seed, non-GMO we've gone to, and even with the residue, very good crop health, very good stands. And our fertility application has also changed in our system. And this photo here shows this is the first application of any nutrients to this corn you see in the screen. I'm side dressing probably 100 pounds of N, I think, in this field. This year we were down to 70. We grew a bushel of corn with 0.35 units of N this year. And then we've gone to some annual grazing. So these are photos from this year. We had cereal rye in the spring, got ahead of the cattle a little bit, so I terminated it and drilled this mix in. So May 28th, this was drilled, and by July 31st, this is what we had for cover crop. So now, I want to get into the numbers a little bit, the comparison. So, as of late, UNL has developed an ag budget calculator, and I've used it to analyze the profitability on our farm. And down here will be like its sample report. It has a whole farm module on it, so you can analyze your whole farm as a system. So up here it'll show your total revenue and total costs on the farm, and then it'll separate everything into entities and fields, crops, and so forth. So what we've done is compared our farm and then compared it with what we feel is the average for the area. So we analyzed those 5 years. So just as an example, this is an Illinois farm doc, put this out a couple years ago, showed the profit loss of corn and soybean farmers for this time period, 2005 to 2023 at the time. Interesting to note that the 5 years we analyzed, there was an average of a $50 loss an acre. And this is figuring all costs, including land costs and so forth. So when we got done with the analysis of that field for those 5 years, we came up with a profit per year, and we had a $200 average profit per acre, compared to the average Illinois guess of minus 50. Generally, the oats does not return as well. And when I do an oats budget, I don't include going into the seed enterprise. This is just, I'm using kind of a commodity price on oats. So you can see in 2018, we went to non-GMO beans. That brought the profit up quite a bit on there. So I tried to put this into a graph. And what we have here is the blue bar is our 5-year soil health program that we analyzed. The red bar is if you were corn and corn, and the green bar is corn and beans. And what I'm trying to show here is even at higher corn prices, which at that time period, $5 was a really good price, the extended rotation with less corn and beans in it was still outperforming profitability-wise to the corn beans. Average cash price in our area those 5 years was $3.36. Therefore, you can see how there was probably a loss. We had $3.70 right there. There was probably a loss for the average corn bean farmer. And I've had people tell me that, well, you have a niche with your oats. and so forth. You know, we've developed a market for it, and they're like, well, we can't do that. So I said, well, let's say you plant a crop where you just break even. So breaking even on the oats crop in the 5-year rotation, we still had this profitability. It's what that spring crop does in the rotation that makes the profitability of the corn and beans. So as of late, I've kind of changed the way I display this. I've gone to showing a graph where it shows the revenue and the cost and the net. And this is 2023, and here we're analyzing the entire farm, the system we have in place. Our rotation now is probably more, 30 to 40% small grains. So you can see our revenue is less, but where we're gaining is on the cost per acre. And this is the average over all crops. So spring crops have very little input, very little chemical needed. So you can see here in 2023, this was the results after comparing. We had quite a bit of difference here. I'll even point out that when I talk to my agronomist, I will concede 20 bushels an acre on our irrigated corn because we're just not pushing it as hard anymore, and we're still getting these results. So where are the savings coming from? So I came up with these numbers here. Field operations, on our total farm, we're doing 51% of what the normal farms are in the area. Chemical use is down to 18%. We have not used any insecticide or fungicide since 2011. And it really wasn't like a decision that was made, it just, all at once we weren't needing them. Our seed cost is 64%, and actually, we spend quite a bit on cover crop seed. But a lot of our cash crops are grown with seed that we produce on our farm. When I put it in the budget, I put it in the price that we sell it at. Fertilizer, as of the last couple of years, the only thing we've applied is in crop to oats and to corn. So we slowly pulled back on these over a period of several years, and what I'm trying to come up with now is a budget, and this is a little bit speculative. I'm trying to come up with a budget of a transitioning farmer. If you tried to go into a regenerative system like this, what would your profit or losses be the first couple of years as your system changed? I'm not really sure how many years it took me to get these results. So in 2025, our total variable costs, this is without land, overhead, were 44% of what the norm was. So 2024, this was a projection done before the year started this year. We thought, hey, things look pretty good. Corn was 480. That was our local corn, minus the basis. And things didn't quite turn out that way. I was almost probably getting a little cocky with, hey, this is really working. So I just want to kind of take you through what happened this year. Third of our farm was in oats this year. Right about reproductive time, we had a hail event. It wasn't real serious, but the oats was in the flower. We do not insure our oats. Yields were about half. Okay, so, and then in our soybeans, we had not used any insecticide since 2011. It's really tough to be challenged, and we had well above threshold levels of aphids, and the decision was made not to treat for about 3 weeks. Also, we had a soybean field where the decision was made after oats the year before. I planted some buckwheat in for harvest. There was not enough cover on this field for weed control. In our non-GMO beans, we can no longer control our hemp. It all has to be done culturally with cover crops. So I will note that if you notice these aphids are all kind of a tan color, they never did really green up. They never got healthy. By the end of 3 weeks, we had a parasitic wasp explosion and they were gone. So there was some benefits there. We actually had a UNL class come out to see our farm, and this is what I had to show them. A weedy soybean field, and they're like, well, how can you make money on that? So we did a budget analysis of this field at the end of the year. We did have 51 bushel beans on this field. We're delivering them right now, believe it or not. We have less than 1% foreign material in these soybeans. It was a profitable field. But this was a 2024 soybean field where we did have what I felt the proper cover crop in the spring. We drill our soybeans, these are irrigated. Generally in our area, they quit drilling beans because of disease. I found with oats in the rotation, it really breaks up the disease problems, so we don't apply any fungicide. So this was a really good soybean field. And corn this year. So I've gone more to planting in having cereal rye before corn, because we have trouble keeping enough residue on the ground. So here I'm planting, we're trying some compost extract for the first time in furrow. We've been playing around with that. Of the 4 years we've been doing untreated seed, this was the first year I saw a difference in populations. So I was really busy at the time of emergence. I'm not sure if it was wireworms, but we had a 15% drop in populations on our untreated seed. So we had a test plot. We had a test plot with probably 12 different varieties. 4 of them were treated seed. What was interesting to note with that is a variety with a 15% loss in population won the test plot, an untreated seed. So that was good to see this year. So this is the spot right where we took the picture that the corn planter was at on July 22nd. So you can see how we're having trouble maintaining cover, even with what we were planting in that time. There's 70 units of N put on this field. There's been a lot of trouble in the neighborhood with southern rust, tar leaf spot. This was some really healthy corn. So this is dry land. At this point, you can see the soil is moist. In 2024, our August and September were the driest on record in 132 years. So everything you saw here, this is what had to finish this corn out. Right in this spot, it was probably going around 180. So here's the results then. We didn't get our corn sold at 480 like I had on the last one. We had half an oats crop. But when I went to talk to the agronomist in the fall, he says everybody was really frustrated with yields, multiple applications of fungicide and insecticide not making a difference. And when we got done with all the numbers, we were still more profitable. So here's 2025 projections. I put in 420 corn, 978 beans, and more of a normal oats crop. The price of commodity oats is down quite a bit. It'll probably be more of a break-even thing. I will not take it out of the rotation. I need it for the health of the system. Healthy soils give back. So I find this interesting. In the Bible, they have, but during the 7th year, the land shall have a complete Sabbath for the Lord. I will bestow such blessings on you in the 6th year that there will be crop enough for 3 years. And this is Leviticus 25. And as it goes on, it also says any produce can be used for beasts of the field or for the poor. So maybe the farmer can think he's the poor one, but I thought, well, this is interesting. I'd like to do a budget on this. 15% of the farm not harvested. So I came up with this projection where 15% of the farm was planted to a diverse mix that was probably grazed in the winter, just enough to pay for the seed. And then I used my inputs and so forth for the corn and beans that were on the other part of the system. So we have more people in our neighborhood actually talking about this kind of thing. It's tough to find markets for other crops. Do we somehow get a regenerative part of the rotation in our farm? So enough about numbers. I kind of, I get tired of talking about the economics of it sometimes, and I like to show just some of the results we've seen through the years. We've had some big rain events in the last 2 years, and even though we have dry spells, that seems to be the new norm. This is a rain event. I believe it was in May. This field's planted the corn already. This field had to be replanted. Crop insurance paid for the replant. All good, right? How many years can this happen up here? If you see these ridges up here, how many years can that happen before this is degraded to the point where it doesn't work? So to fix this problem, now he's put a center pivot on this field. One of the same rain events, when the water does run off of our hills, it'll flood the bottoms. These pictures were taken, this is about a mile apart. When we were first married, this field would actually have cattails in it in the spring. We had a lot of trouble with wetness. And we found once we can fix the water cycle and get the aggregation back in the ground, it can handle a lot of heavy rain. Another example here, this field here was just drilled to soybeans. This drains 400 acres. It's a 400-acre watershed. This is the same neighborhood, doesn't drain near as many acres. A lot of water was running over the road these days after these rainfalls. And I'm standing right where there's culverts. So this is a reverse look at it. This is the following year when I had it in oats. In the 60s and the 70s, they had a culvert there, and it was always being overwhelmed and taking the road out, so they put in 2 culverts. And then they put in a levee to get the water to run along the road bit to the creek. So the last 3 years, we watched it really close. With our heavy rain events, no water has gone through those 2 culverts. We also have a lot of runoff from the watershed that's above us in Moat Creek. And some things we can't avoid is the creek will get so high after heavy rains that it runs out of its banks. So this is one of our fields. This is asking a lot of your cover crop. We went out with a loader, took off the logs, and we no-tilled soybeans into this. That's called protection from your cover crop. So if you look on a web swell survey map of where I took this picture, this is Thurman sand. It's 70% sand, 15% clay, and this is the reason we have infiltration. The NRCS has come out and done infiltration tests, and they figure our farm averages around 15 inches an hour. They found areas that are as high as 40. And a lot of even no-till soils in our area are probably a ½ inch an hour. Comparing analysis of what we actually are producing, and when we were in the Farms Project, they took an analysis of the oats that we were producing on that field. And just for the heck of it, I looked up kind of what oats should be doing, and this was the results we got. Almost no phosphorus was put on this field for those 5 years. Where did that come from? No potassium was put on the field, and definitely the micronutrients. Where is that coming from? And all we can figure it's the increase in biology that we have. So what did that? You're right. That's how we tell what's the sweetest corn on the farm. So one thing I've observed in the last few years is I can almost predict which field the coons are gonna hit. This field here was in peas and a cover crop the year before, so there's 0 nitrogen applied here. The field directly across the creek had the same setup the year before, and that's the field they hit on the other side of the creek. So on the other side of the creek, it was corn on corn this year. They absolutely stayed away from that corn, and then they went to this one. They generally pick on the corn that's in the healthiest part of the system. So we do like to plant pollinator strips on our farm also, and I know I have a video here, I don't know if it'll show up. If you can hear it. Yeah, we can't hear it, but the bird life and the buzzing is really quite stunning on this. And it's not that much. You can see that's an oat field up there. This is along the creek. That's all the wider it is. But that's kind of a view from our farm there, so. That's all I have for you. Any questions?
What kind of a mix do you have in your pollinator strip?
Okay, so that was planted in the spring. So the yellow is mustard because it blooms quite early, and then there was clovers in it. Also, I would imagine peas. It was probably something planted to get the earlier flowers going.
When do you put those in?
Same time I'm planting oats, so it's probably end of March, April 1st. Our bees are probably a half a mile away. When I grew up, we had bees on the farm. We're trying to get some back on this farm, but they're half a mile away and they'll still find this.
Have you a rough idea if your neighbor with all the runoff adopted your principles as you're doing them now? How many years would it take him or her to have similar infiltration to what you have on your ground?
So, that's a good question, and that's what I'm trying to come up with now, because you can't take my rotation on year one and get the results, I'm sure of that. And so now I'm trying to come up with the transition period. I'm trying to decide if at the end of 5 years you can have that results. But that is, you need to have productive cover crops. You can't be just trying to shoehorn some cover crop into your corn bean rotation and getting minimal growth. So the budget I'm doing, I'm actually trying to do with, okay, if a farmer went from straight corn beans to 15% diverse cover crop on his ground, and hopefully he can graze it and get some income off of it that way. But if you did that in increments over a 5-year period, you would have most of the farm covered. And I don't know if you could get the infiltration that fast, how fast the biology will respond to aggregation. And that's one question I'm trying to answer now. I would like to get a hold of a new piece and start from scratch and see how long it takes with what I know now.
Yeah, you mentioned you used compost extract. Did you feel that was valuable, or do you think you had the soil health in place that you didn't notice much difference?
We're starting to wonder that. Okay, so I did have a replicated side-by-side this year where we did not have a response. But I've seen too many farms where they're getting a response. So we have to analyze the compost that we're using, I know. But we're not going to give up on it. We're working on it right now. I'm thinking, to see if we can get even responses to on really healthy fields. And we're treating seed also with compost extract. And that's a really simple system. All we're doing there is we put our seed in a hard tote, and we will soak it, and we immediately start dumping it into another hard tote, and we go back and forth a few times. and it's amazing what kind of coating we're getting that way.
Your own compost, or you buy?
Yes. Yeah. Jolene took the Elaine Ingham course, and we're trying to figure it out, so.
You had a picture there of corn growing what looks like you had interseeded it with something. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of work with 60-inch rows. I like to do it. And that was, so on that picture, actually, we go back to it. That was, I think it was more of a cool season mix, because I wanted it green in the fall after we harvested. So we could get some grazing. And let's see here, right there. The year before we had done with cowpeas, and it was amazing. We had the ground covered, and this is in 60-inch corn. For weed control, we're basically depending on this cover we have here. You have to pick which field you do it on, so you have good weed control. So this was in cereal rye the year before, cereal rye winter peas. So the weed control was pretty easy because you can't have much residual in there to make this work. I really like doing stuff like this. If I say, hey, this is what's making me money, a lot of guys will go, well, that's just way too complicated. I'm almost not showing it anymore. But this year we'll be experimenting with it. I might even do some 90-inch rows so I can get a more robust cover crop. So you look at this is 60-inch rows. This corn was so healthy, at this point of the year, the leaves are almost touching. And that was non-treated seed. What's that?
How did you seed it and when?
Shut off every other row on the corn planter, planted normal time.
Cover crop.
Oh, the cover crop was at V7.
How'd you do it?
I have an old Henniker air seeder, and I set it up, and that's another thing. It's a piece of equipment most people wouldn't have. I have an old Henniker air seeder that's set up to put them rows in there. Yeah.
We tried that this year. We didn't have the cover, so it didn't work too well, but we planted corn. And then we had an all plant crust buster. We just pulled some of the gangs off.
Yep.
Just rolled through there and planted it and got a really nice stand. But I think the secret to what you're doing there is having that cover and your herbicide.
Right.
Leaves don't take them.
And, and I forgot to mention this, in our whole system, instead of doubling down with the herbicide, like they're all telling us to do now, to get our resistant weeds, I'm actually pulling back on some of the residuals because I think it's hurting my cover crop part. I mean, I'm using just enough residual for early season. And there was some on here. I think there's some metolachlor on here, low rate. But at V7, there was no sign of it.
Did you adjust your corn population?
So the population here is total field. It was probably, I would say 28,000, where normally I'd probably have 30. So that means in the row, it was 56. We found, I've done it enough years now, if I have the rows north and south, I can get equal yield. So my question now is, if I would go to 90 and have a really robust cover crop in there, I could actually just treat the corn itself for weeds and not, if I set my sprayer up that way, don't spray between the rows, just leave that to cover crop. Can I get 80% corn yield on that field and still get the benefit of almost like a regen between those 90-inch rows? I mean, that's what I'm looking at this year, possibly.
So did you turn the cows out right away after you?
Yes. Yep. And we have a lot of pictures of that. When you combine it, the day you combine it, it'll be green between the rows. And that's why we use some stuff that wouldn't freeze. When we used the cow peas, by the time the cows got in it, the cow peas were pretty much disintegrated.
How do you remain patient while also being progressive and to better articulate that maybe is, how do you decide to try something new, even if you have all the money in the world, versus as it pertains to the budget you just gave? How do you sit down and say, I'm gonna try this thing and have confidence in it and know, like, well, if it doesn't pan out, maybe it's multifaceted question, but being patient, but also being progressive.
Yeah. Well, usually 5% of the farm. I tell you, and in the 80s, there was no way I could have tried some of this because everything was running too thin, you know, as we're getting along in years. I can take the risk. We can bear the risk now, I guess. And I've done enough of this stuff now where usually I have a pretty good idea if it's gonna work.
It's probably sacrilege here to bring this up, but we're in this area right here, but we're double cropping all of our wheat acres back to soybeans.
Yeah.
So we kind of, our philosophy is we're harvesting our cover crop,
Right.
but we don't have any cows, and so we have a pretty set rotation, but have the time in it that talking about
Right.
too. So.
Right. So what he's,
You know, we're machinery and chemistry dependent too because of that, but.
right.
That if we have average or better rains, it works really, really well.
So what Doug is asking here, and I've given this some thought, is okay, how about wheat and then followed by soybeans, and you're harvesting, basically you're harvesting your cover crop. I don't have pictures of it, I've done the interseeding soybeans and oats, you know, with the wide rows. And the only problem I have with that is the wheat would be my year to get that diversity and biomass in there. So the problem with just putting a soybean in there is I didn't have diversity for the cover crop, and I had a low carbon
Well, we have
cover
corn.
crop.
It's corn.
Right, but for that year.
Yeah.
Corn beans, eventually you're always losing
Right.
carbon.
Right.
So how can I get over half of my rotation where it's building? And that's how, so yeah, I thought, okay, I can make that work. But one of my pet peeves is when somebody's like, okay, I'm gonna try cover crops. So I'm gonna plant oats, I'm gonna take that all off, I'm gonna hay it.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna plant a cover crop, but I wanna make that pay too, so I'm gonna take it all off.
Right.
There's that, and we have to give back.
But we never harvest hay.
Yeah,
That way, so
yeah.
hopefully the grain.
The great thing about cattle is we're just cycling. You know, they're walking off of 5-10% of the nutrients and the rest is there.
Well,
So-
I'll ask it, you've had pens and handling facilities forever to make that work.
What's that?
You've had pens and handling facilities to make that work when you're farming.
Yeah. So I have a brother-in-law with,
Younger than I am, but not much, so.
basically I have access to unlimited supply of cattle, is what I kind of will say, but a lot of the fencing we put up is temporary. We'll put up a high tensile, basically around the farm.
Or they're not your cattle, but don't you say?
No. As of right now, we own no cattle.
Okay, all right, yeah, I mean, that's an option.
So when I'm putting these numbers in the budget, I'm figuring grazing days,
You charge rent for that or something?
right? And boy, if you own the cattle, I can really make some wild budgets.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can really make it profitable. I'm just trying to put in, our pasture cost right now is $230 a day if you're renting a pasture. So if I'm annual grazing in the summer, I'm using $230 a day by the grazing days per acre. But in one day, we'll have a wire around the whole farm. What's that?
That's per head? $2.30 a day?
Yes.
Per head.
Pasture in northeast Nebraska is $230 per cow calf pair per day. So there's no pasture left. So there's huge competition for pasture. And our joke in northeast Nebraska is a pasture is an exercise lot between corn stalks. Because they're generally grazed down to a golf course. So,
Could I make a little comment here?
sure.
I'm not really asking you a question, I'm just gonna make a little statement here, but we run cattle and we run wheat, summer covers, we plant some of our wheat goes to multi-species summer covers every year. And we either graze that in the summer or we graze it in the winter, we call it winter stockpile grazing. And that is the only practice that we have on our farm that really starts making a difference on soil organic.
Agree, 100%. And you know, I can't say for sure, but I'm almost 100% sure that it's that part of the system that works. You're going to get a slow gain if you think you're going to just try to get it into the corn bean rotation, cover crops. You can probably plant early season corn, get it in a little earlier, do the interseeding. It's just way simpler to plant a diverse cover crop and have some cows on it.
Do you ever have trouble planting the next year back into that from the cows?
No.
No, yeah, not with the moisture, you don't move them off.
Well, I said one of my mentors is Paul Yassa, and he's the guru of setting equipment. But our soils have changed so much. I mean, we have good equipment. We plant into ridiculous looking stuff, and if you get everything set right and you get the seed in deep, because you know, you can't have an excuse that you lost yield because you didn't have the machine set right. So it might be a challenging set, but if you get it set right, it will do just as good as the perfect seed bed.
We got time for a couple more questions. Any takers?
What was your grazing blend there after, between your oats and your corn that you showed?
Which one?
Where you were drilling right after the oats?
This one here?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this is probably like an 8 or a 10-way mix. I can see sun hemp, there's cow peas in there, but there's also spring peas, buckwheat. There's a little bit of oats back in there. I'm sure there's probably a few sunflowers in there, they're not coming through yet. So this is it's set up to be more for corn, so it was probably legume heavy. The picture I have with the cows, with the sunflowers and everything, that was like a 13-way mix, you know. But we had a group of people out for a field day on the field with whichever one that is, this picture up here. And it was a 95-degree day, and we're standing in this cover crop, and the one guy goes, just feel your legs, and they were cool. And what didn't make sense is it's a 95-degree day at the end of July, and we had blooming peas in here. And if those peas would have been in there by themselves, they would have been pretty much fried, yeah. So it's the combination, you know, the synergy between everything. So I'll go on the Smart Mix calculator. I'll start with seeds that we have, and then I'll put in what my resource concern is, and I'll just start throwing things in, look at the price a little bit, and that's kind of the way I do it, and it comes up with the ratios. So it's almost like the more diversity, you can't outguess it. You never know what's going to do good. It's almost like the more I throw at it, the better, because something's going to hit. This year, I don't have any pictures. For some reason, brown mustard was, we had no rain in August, September. We had brown mustard this tall. And the heifers liked it.
So thanks for your story and experience sharing. How about your 60-inch corn? Did you try many cover crop mix to catch the opportunity of space time and put more diversity on your system.
So you're saying different kinds of mixes?
Yeah, different kinds of mixes on 16-inch corn.
Yes. My limitation, when I've been doing it, my limitation has been the residuals. So I've tried like ryegrass, things like that, and I haven't been able to have it take. So I've tried the warm season mixes with cowpeas, buckwheat. Those are the ones that seem to do the best for warm season. Mung beans. I've thrown quite a bit of stuff in, and what happens is it seems like just a few things will kind of take over. Like when I had cowpeas in the mix, it looked like it was all cowpeas. So that picture there with the cool season mix, that was probably 8 different species, and there's probably 2 of them that were doing well. I think to see the benefits of different species mixes would be better if I can get the residual out of that, of the, you know, the path between the rows. That's kind of my plan to try.
What does your brother-in-law use for a water source when grazing?
So we have the benefit of a mile of Bow Creek going right through the center of our farm. And when it's 13 below zero, that water runs so fast. It's groundwater fed. That water runs fast enough it doesn't freeze. So we have water all winter for them. And that is one benefit. On this field actually right here, my agronomist friend, he lets me use his water, and I have some above ground pipe feeding that. And we don't have cattle on here in the wintertime. So we'll put up some temporary above ground pipe and put up tanks.
Okay, Jeff, I think we're about done here, so I appreciate everything that you brought to us. And I'm sure if you got some other questions, Jeff will be around for a little while, and we want to get you over to your break in your next section, so let's give him a round of applause.